Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're tuning in from. My name is Chris Rainey, co-founder here at HR Leaders, and I'll be your host for today's live panel discussion where we're going to be talking about how AI is shaping the future of skills-based talent management. With that being said, let me introduce you to our amazing panelists. First up, we've got David Doe, who's the Vice President of Talent Strategy and Excellence at Shell. We've got Sarah Nutolo, who's the Global Head of Talent, Culture, and Inclusion at Reckitt. Loïc Michel, who's the co-founder and CEO at 365 Talents. Alexandra Foster, who's a vice president of people experience at Kelly. And last but certainly not least, Tony Wiseman, who's the digital HR director at Glanbia. Well, I needed to take a bigger breath there. I ran out of oxygen doing those intros as well. But Alex, I said I'll pick on you first. Firstly, how are you? Let's say that first.
Oh, I'm doing well. It's a good Thursday here.
Nice, nice. Um, Tough question to jump in, but let's just jump straight into the deep end. How has the role of HR evolved in your organization with the shift of, from traditional job-centric models to AI-powered skills-based approaches?
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful question. And I would say, first of all, I'm honored to be here with everyone. So thanks for having me. The wonderful thing about working at an organization like Kelly, where we're a talent solutions provider, is that you get to serve as both a testing ground, right, for new and innovative approaches, but you also have the benefit of hearing from a cross section of employers about what they're looking for, what they're struggling with as it relates to a host of talent solutions, but AI being one of those. And naturally, we've been on our AI journey for about 6 years. So naturally, when we started, our analytics and technology teams, they jumped right in. They were already building their skills. They knew what was coming, and had already been doing the work to think about approaching their roles differently. But as we talked about embedding more solutions for our people, we had some other teams come to the forefront. And one team that I'm really proud of is our learning and development teams. I think part of it was that they wanted to be prepared for all the skills that they were going to help build across the organization in support of the shift to more AI solutions. But another part of it was they were eager to tap into all of the benefits of using AI more in their roles. They became sort of citizen developers. They were raising their hands to test things like Copilot, and really their roles begin to shift earlier than the balance of the organization. And what I think that's taught me about how HR roles are going to shift in general is that we have to help the organization by moving into more of what I would call a forward position, being pilots and understanding, being curious, being the chief learning officer is kind of what I see my role is as not helping others learn, but being curious and learning about the new ways of working, learning about the technology, pushing myself, helping to build skills amongst my team so that we are experiencing this change together with our teams and that we're not doing it to them. And so I think we'll continue to see more of that in HR teams and HR functions where we are working side by side and navigating this change with our teams, but also at the same time, we're looking for what's next and always looking around the corner so that we're helping to maintain, the healthy culture and address the obvious concerns that our employees have with AI. Those are my
Alex,
opening
just
thoughts.
a quick question there, and that was wonderful. In terms of the organization and how you go, because the shift to AI brings with it obviously a lot of promise, but there's a piece where the digital literacy or the digital fluency of your people within the organization kind of needs to be brought up to a certain level as well. How have you looked at that, or how have you attacked that issue where different levels within the organization will have different levels of fluency or digital fluency?
Mm. I do believe that is what it was motivating our learning team. So we have a cross-functional team that is thinking specifically about AI and digital adoption at our organization. Our learning team is well represented there. But we've also launched recently what we call a learning steer co. And it's probably a common practice at some larger organizations, but it's a newer approach for Kelly because learning is decentralized. We have some learning that is owned centrally within our learning team, and some that happens that is more kind of role based. and the shifts and changes there happen more rapidly. So that work is deployed closer to the teams and the businesses that they support. But the steer code brings together a cross section of folks, and we're trying to anticipate what those gaps are, much like everyone is. I also lead the teams that are responsible for our employee listening strategy. And so this quarter around on our employee engagement survey, we asked a sentiment question. We don't need leaders to activate on it, but that kind of steering committee and AI and digital teams are looking at this insight. We asked employees, how open are you to using AI every day at work? Do you feel you have the tools that you need? And of course, we'll put that in our AI tool to help us sense check where do we have opportunities to accelerate work because our employees are open and they understand. Where are they feeling like they don't have what they need, or that they need a better understanding of the tools available, how we plan to use them, where are the concerns about ethics. And so I think always opening up the channels of communication for Kelly is really critical, and listening directly to our leaders, but also working with or directly to our employees, but also connecting with leaders, HR partners, our recruiting team to have an understanding of what skills are in demand at any given time. But it is a challenge for sure. There's not one. There's no silver bullets here.
Thank you. That was great.
May I ask a question as well to you, Alex? I'm sorry,
nervous.
Chris, you are not asking the questions.
I know.
We are. Today we are.
I listen, this is great. I'm like, Alex, I'm sorry. Like, Alex, I didn't know I was going to get all these questions fired away. Go for it.
Yeah.
I love it.
But Alex, you shared that as a talent solution provider at Kelly, you are, in the front seat, in the front row of all these transformations, and you are experimenting and testing, and you are really mature. How would you describe the maturity of your customers in these transformations? Like, if you had to give a grade from 1 to 10, and is it verticalized? Do you have some particular industry where you see it's going easier and you speak the same language, and other industries where there is a gap that is harder to fill? Like, curious about this.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So Kelly's been on an AI journey for about 6 years, maybe almost 7 years, with the most mature vertical being our business to service delivery model. I would say our own internal HR model is maybe a lap or two behind that, simply based on our size and our volume and where we're making investments, just like every other organization. And then we've also recently released some products, so newer but more mature, because our clients are pushing us there, where we actually have digital workers who accompany our talent on their assignments with our clients. And so I see that there's a range, obviously, where you have industries that are making a shift in the tech space, in sometimes even in manufacturing, where they're looking at ways to reduce cost and to shift that work that's necessary and critical, but maybe arduous, repetitive, and freeing up workers to do more of that thought work and the creative work that maybe only humans can do. We're seeing that product vertical accelerate pretty rapidly. So that would suggest that our clients in some spaces are really ahead of the game. But I'm also seeing that, right, and hearing from colleagues in a variety of settings in HR and technology and shared services, that even small organizations are looking to optimize. So I think, sometimes we talk about leveling changes in the industry and the future of work, and AI is one of those great levelers, because whether you're a large organization and you're looking to deploy AI, or you're a small organization looking to capitalize some of the benefits, you're able to tap in and play. Of course, we've got to have good guardrails, good guidelines, but it is a space where an organization that has the mindset and the cultural readiness to use more AI, they can get involved regardless of their size. So it's very interesting what we're seeing. It's a great question, Laura.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd love to jump over to you, David, because I know you're already pretty not far ahead, but I'd say for many companies that I speak to, could you share some of the ways that your organization's using AI to identify critical skills gaps, for example, and some of the steps that you're taking based on those lessons that you've learned?
Thanks, Chris. I'm not certain I would necessarily characterize us right at the front of the queue. But certainly we are in the process of piloting both a talent intelligence platform and LXP, and we've taken our time to think about how we would do that and spoken across a number of peer organizations. And we made a very conscious choice to take the talent intelligence platform, the taxonomy that comes with it, and the AI, and use that as the sort of base layer that goes across both the HCM and also the learning experience platform. So that provides a unified taxonomy that allows us to go across these different programs. The challenge we found with other talking to peer companies is basically each of these solutions has their own taxonomies, and you create a poor user experience. So we chose the talent intelligence platform because it has that labor market connection and that it moves close with the labor market. And of course, you have to go through a normalization process where you take your positions, your job profiles, and you feed it into the AI engine. And you find that, you've got some interesting acronyms that make life difficult for the AI engine. I mean, it's like a child learning to read, except it's a child learning to read on steroids. So once you're able to tell it what the acronyms are, it will quickly learn and adapt. But it's also important to then have good job descriptions, et cetera, et cetera. And we've also had to be really clear what's a competence and requires an assessment. In other words, the AI shouldn't be touching that. And where actually it's a skill and we're prepared to let the AI do inference. And so essentially the AI will match skills to people, to jobs, and to learning content. And it can infer when someone ingests their work profile, essentially the skills for that individual based on their experience, the breadth of that experience in a number of roles, and the recency of that experience. And so that's an initial inference, and the individual can then change and update that, but we can still see the lineage, in other words, what the AI has put in and what the individual has changed. And the value for that is that typically men tend to be more effusive in a CV than women, and indeed, people from a majority ethnic group tend to be more effusive than a minority ethnic group. So you tend to see a sort of leveling up in terms of the skills, which is great for diversity. But then for the individual, you get real personalization. So you can understand the skill gaps against your current job and against anything you aspire to do. And that can pull you across into the learning experience platform. And again, there we've made a very conscious choice to prioritize the skill gaps against the current job, because we all know that if you take a learning course, but then you don't actually apply that learning is relatively quickly lost. So for the individual, it's about uploading, it's about making it a core currency, it's about how they find jobs and anything on our internal jobs board, but it's also about their understanding of how they sit against the labor market, and then giving them access via our LXP to not only the 13,000 or so courses that we have created and curated, but the tens of thousands of courses that we have available through other providers, and then personalizing that for them, because you can imagine if you've got that number of courses, it's overwhelming. So it's about helping the individual, a bit like Netflix, to get to the solution that they're looking for, and empowering them, but being really clear from an organizational perspective. We want to prioritize learning for the job, which skills we attach to which jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're seeking to do. The challenge is proving the technology needs to work. So we're piloting that. And once we've proved that, then we can talk about the use cases. And that's really important, because we're an industry which has, safety critical roles as well as highly commercial roles. And so discipline by discipline, or business by business, we're building out that confidence that we can adopt that approach and switch off other solutions, which the businesses have put in place over a number of years to do those type of things, often on very particularly the use cases like mentoring or some aspect of gig assessment or other things. So our aim is to create more of a unified platform.
So interesting. It sounds like you are maybe, a couple laps ahead of where we are internally in terms of getting to the phase of piloting and testing out. Any early learnings there that you're finding?
I think some of the challenges are, for example, if you've got an external course provider, they often don't come with course content descriptions. So then people immediately say, yes, let's use an AI tool to do a transcript to create. And the problem with that is, again, you then get a certain number of characters. it doesn't always turn up. The AI generated course content doesn't remove the responsibility of someone looking over it and saying, well, it wasn't that great to start off with, or perhaps it starts with, this is blended learning. So then you immediately get a skill associated with blended learning. So you can't immediately trust just AI tools to do this. There's a significant amount of investment, and there's a significant amount of skepticism. So this is as much, I would say, as a technology journey as it is a change journey. I mean, I talked about the difference between a skill and a competence, but going through that journey and then getting clarity there, and then making sure that you're adding certain taxonomy into the overall taxonomy. So, for example, if I was to say subsea, the AI thinks diver, but actually we're talking about well engineering. So, but actually 70% of the initial matches were accurate. So it really is about investing your time and thinking about this in a change, how you do change management. And each time you roll out, we're thinking about which personas are in scope. So if someone's, early on in career, they're often looking for a mentor. So how can we have a campaign that is associated with that category versus someone who's on an offshore rig, who's really thinking about, well, what skills do I have for the job, or how do I fit in the broader industry, and am I employable, etc. So each persona has different interests for the sort of different aspects of the functionality. And so it's not a cookie cutter approach to change management either. Those are some of the learnings I would share.
Sarah, I'd love for you to jump in. I can see you've been nodding away. Sarah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I was, because of course what David said actually was sparking a number of thoughts in me. So one around, I do completely agree with him on the taxonomy, coming from skills to development to jobs, which is exactly what we're facing as well. So skills is one of the, let's say, the foundings, and the ontology is one of the founding areas of the system, but also one of its limitations, if you like. Because if you want to have a great system, you have to define skills in advance, because otherwise the AI won't recognize them, and therefore you hire for something, you develop for something, and you grow for something else. So there needs to be a consistent taxonomy there. This is number one. But the second, which I was also curious, maybe to hear from my colleagues on their approach, is how do you bring it to life, and whether, in your experience, also piloting versus early adopters is the way? Because in my experience, piloting might not be the best way because of how the AI works. So normally as exactly as David was saying before, AI and skills together are reshaping the way of change management. Because the normal approach would be you have something to implement and you start small and you start a pilot. But actually with AI, this might not be the best way, because you then introduce bias into the system, because you want the system to replicate something that might be good in a small space, but that might not apply to my bigger or wider space. So actually, in my experience, the best way might be early adopters, because then you involve people with you in the journey. You just scale it, you ask and you allow the engine, the AI, the tool to learn as you go, and then you involve people as you go. But happy to know what my colleagues' experience is about it.
Maybe I can share a few customers examples on how they do when we work with a skills technology or a talent experience platform rollout. And indeed, we see different approaches. The piloting approach is often a good one, but you need to be able to define what is a good scope of the pilot, including the AI part of things. So you do not select one particular job and build your own system around this function or vertical, because then you will have some discrepancies between this and the rest when you want to go at scale. So usually you select something a little bit more horizontal, and then you need to have the sufficient level of data for sure, and then the sufficient engagement. So that's where probably you can have even ambassadors during your pilot. That being said, some customers do this way. So we work with companies like Total Energy, and that's the way they're selected to roll out. So stages after stages, populations after populations. On the other hand, you can have a big bang approach. And like the railway company in France, SNCF, 150K users, they launch in one day. So no piloting at all, but ambassadors and lots of change management and the connection of new ways of working with AI and new use cases on the platform and old-fashioned ones. So the more related to performance with an annual system to review performance. So they needed to combine that so that they had a buy-in directly from everyone, because that was answering the standard approaches and I would say fueling the new approaches at the same time. And if I was asked to select one good way to do it, I would not know. As a tech provider, I would go for the full rollout in one day. We are about to launch on 50,000 users in an engineering leader in Europe on Monday in one click. That's awesome. Like the whole company will be alive in one day. So that's great. It's not always the case. So when you go for a pilot, you need to select really precisely the populations and the scope for sure. We talked about how the AI and data and digital teams are naturally a good fit for that. We have lots of customers doing that. Like we work with GE Vernova in the US, and this is for these jobs in particular that they want to start with this skills-based approach. So careful selection of the pilot scope, or one day big bang are two cool options, I would say.
Yeah, indeed. I agree with you. I agree with you, Loïc, because also what I've learned through the process is that really implementing technologies, specifically when they are skills, which is something super new and AI related, is really not for the faint-hearted, because you have to train people, train the organization, and train the AI simultaneously, and going live with no chance of a little adjustment beforehand.
Yeah.
So this, I think, is also something that it's a great challenge. It might also be a bit of a limitation depending on the risk inclination of the different companies, but it's definitely an element to consider.
Yeah, well, then I think you also have to, Sarah, think about the different personas, right? And so you say, where do you get the best value from an AI perspective? Oftentimes we think about testing things out and piloting them. Sometimes we say, let's give it to our top performers. Let's give it to, the strongest members of our team, folks who've been in role and are excelling. And what our experience has been is that you need to take a more representative and inclusive approach, because sometimes the greatest value is derived from those individuals who are, yes, they're performing on target, but maybe they could use help working at a higher level, completing some of those tasks. And so I think our teams, our AI team has done a good job of, when we are piloting and testing things out, to be very intentional about the pilot groups and to really understand what we're measuring. What does success look like? And it is not just the deployment of it, obviously, it's the impact and the value to that individual, value to the team, and the value to the organization. But I do think it's a really great challenge to think about, how do we do that in a way that isn't throwing things off in the organization, because it is a lot of change at one time.
Yeah. So talking of change, Tony, what are some of the things that you've in terms of the ethical considerations that you've I don't think we can have a conversation around AI and not talk about some of the ethical considerations on implementing this in talent management. How have you addressed these?
Yeah. I was thinking about that, Chris, as the guys were talking, and like you introduced me earlier as the digital HR director in Glanbia. And I also have, for my sins, been asked to lead a group to develop our AI policy for the whole organization, as well as the employee guidelines. And one of the things that's come up again and again with regards to policy and guidelines is the ethical side of it. And I suppose being in HR and working in HR for so long, when we're dealing with personal data, and the use of personal data, ethics is always a big piece, but now more than ever, it's crucial. And there's an acronym that I use. It's a BTPA, and the BTPA stands for bias, transparency, privacy, and accountability. And when we talk about, say, the bias and discrimination, like the real danger, I suppose, you have with AI systems is that they can perpetuate existing biases if they are trained on historical bias data. So really important that kind of when we're looking at the data that you're using diverse data sets, but also I think it's really important, and this is I suppose where we need to engage more with the industry, technology industry as well, is how do we audit AI algorithms, for bias? That's really important. Second piece then, transparency. I think one of the things that we've learned is how can we gain trust with our employees, and one of the things is to try and be clear or transparent in how AI makes its decisions, particularly in the talent management space, because this is going to impact people's careers or in people's lives. So try and be transparent in how it comes to its decisions is going to be really important. The privacy. This is for me is quite it's so important, but it's difficult as well because there's so many different jurisdictions, and how we ensure compliance with the data protection laws and all those different jurisdictions is something that I suppose we've struggled with, particularly with the onset of generative AI. So while we're using AI, I suppose, for the last number of years, generative AI brings a whole new set of problems in that space. And then accountability, in terms of my BTPA, but accountability, I think the guys have mentioned this already, but it's so important that there's a human in the loop in all of this, so that if AI comes up with a decision, that someone can, review that decision, and that decision can be reversed or changed if you're not happy with it. But that accountability, that someone needs to be accountable for the decision and can't just blame AI, I think that's really, really important. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that ethical side, that BTPA, and looking at it from that perspective.
Love that. I feel like everyone's having to go through a similar process
Yeah.
now in building that out in the organization. So
from a provider standpoint, because we are providing the services and the tech and the AI, and we are responsible for the impact on the ROI. We need to be really relevant and really at the top level on all these BTPA approaches. So that takes different angles. But as a European leader in the space, we need to comply with the new regulations coming on AI. There is the AI Act in Europe, which is going to be published in a couple of weeks. Then you have applicable texts for the different areas, including HR related areas. So you need to be benchmarking, getting advice from the experts and working on that. Good news is that big organizations like the ISO are launching some new ways to approve some of the AI management systems. So there is a new ISO certification we are running at 365 Talents, which is the ISO 42001. And it's brand new. So I guess it's important to rely to this kind of organization that validate the systems, because decades ago, it was all about quality management system. Then we had security management system and cyber security. You had SOC 2. Then we had GDPR for the privacy, for the P of the BTPA. And now there is AI. So it's good to see that you have some top-down approaches and frameworks you can rely on. So that's something I guess it's important to ask to a provider when you are meeting some of them. Hey, how do you comply with these regulations, and how do you translate this regulation into applicable measures into your product and into what we need to do with the product?
And as a provider, do do you see yourself getting asked those questions a lot? Because I have asked questions to different providers at different times, and sometimes the answer you get back probably isn't what I'd expect. And I'm just wondering in terms of like, if someone asks you, can we audit your AI algorithms, to check for bias? How would you even go about that? What would be the approach? Is it because would you just show them that you're meeting standards, you're meeting the legislative standards?
Yeah, I think there is some conviction on like the DNA of the way you are doing it, the product itself. And we talked about skills-based talent management and talent experience. I think if your system is really built around skills, then you might have some discrepancies in the way skills are detected or expressed by the people, but that's better than anything else. Like if you look in the mirror, like in the mirror and in in your back with historical data, and you try to replicate, then you will replicate a bias. With the skills data, you have this common language that is the less biased possible. Maybe it's not 100% unbiased, so you need to validate that. So first, the approach, the DNA of the product, how it's built. And then you have, yes, this big concept of transparency, responsibleness, responsibility, and explainable AI. So as a provider, we just put our AI experts in front of the customers, in front of the HR, in front of the users, in front of the employees, the managers, and they do some keynotes on AI and the impact on HR and why it's doing this and not that. So that it's even training the users so that everyone is upskilling in that space. Then we have some documentations as well. So we have the AI fact sheet by 365 Talents. So it provides a lot of information as well. Gen AI is accelerating the requests from customers. And so it's really evolving. And then they say, oh, Gen AI is a new thing. How is it working now? We need to comply to this and this and this regulations internally. Can you validate that it is not that and not doing this and da. And then we just saw, even with existing customers like large banks, global banks, for example, they just said, okay, we need to stop, not the program, the project, but the implementation of these new capabilities in the product. Take a breath, take a few weeks, validate some elements, and then we'll give a go to the full implementation. And that's what happened. So just ask a little bit more work on our end, but because we have all these different answers, we are able to comply and then to reassure and then to go ahead.
Yeah. Also, the pace of the change is moving so quickly that you're having to update those documents every day at the moment, right? Every few months go by, there's a new release, and there's more updates, more considerations, right? I had a question from David that popped up earlier. David, that someone asked, you obviously walked through sort of the rationale behind the change that you're going through and the technology roadmap, and someone asked, how has that changed the work that you do with your team? Has that freed you up and you and the team up to do other types of work? Has it changed the way just out of interest?
So as I mentioned, we're at the stage of piloting, so we will actually only really go live in August.
Oh wow, okay.
There's an awful lot of work that needs to take. I mean, when you look at an organization of our size and the number of different job profiles we need to ingest, there's quite a lot of cleanup work. I mean, it's the data in and the data out. We've had to be involved in quite deep conversations on ethics, etc. In the longer term, I can absolutely see the return, the ability to understand supply demands, the ability to step away from individual conversations around job opportunities and actually make things more transparent. But the reality is this is a complex space, and so it doesn't come without upfront investment. And I was trying to be clear on that earlier. And really, ultimately to follow on from the points that have just been made, unfortunately, AI is in a position now where there was an Austrian Anglo, I think, philosopher called Michael Polanyi, who said that basically humans know more than they can tell. Well, now computers know more than they can tell. So ultimately, you can't there is no transparent system. If anybody turns up and says, I can tell you how the AI has made a decision, deep learning and certainly generative AI can't do that. So you have to be really clear on what fields we're giving the data access to. And so all of that type of stuff you need to do. And then there's a huge amount of change management effort. So there is a substantial payoff, but it's not upfront. And AI does not work perfectly out of the box. So having to explain to colleagues, they say, oh, no, I don't need to do all of that. AI will do it for me. Well, have you seen the quality of our job descriptions? The average person may not be able to understand some of the job titles. I don't understand some of the job titles. I've been in the company 21 years. So, and I've worked across a number of our businesses. So you can imagine the amount of effort that needs to go in. But once you've done it, as I mentioned earlier, things get much easier, much more rapidly. So, and it kind of speaks to Sarah's point about taking a sufficient size and a sufficient cross-section, but it's building that confidence each time, because if you switch something on and then people say it's rubbish, you lose people at the get-go. So, yeah.
That's an
And
important one.
David, the messaging is so important, isn't it? Because when people hear you're doing something on AI or Gen AI, they think it's going to solve all the problems of the world. But in fact, if you're not, there's a lot of hype,
Yeah, and there's a lot of hype around we're going to get rid of traditional jobs. No, we won't. Our entire legal infrastructure is built around traditional jobs. Skills are very helpful. They're helpful for agility. They're helpful for personal development. They're helpful to understand shifts in the market. They're helpful for personalization. They're helpful in order to rationalize your learning portfolio, to speed up your time to fill, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea that suddenly we're going to abandon jobs, oh, come on, it's not reality. It's been presented. It's one of those things which is an interesting thought exercise. And a lot of people are talking about it, but I don't believe it. And some organizations may have that because they're consultancy type organizations. But if you've got an organization that has assets, that's sunk capital, you're going to have traditional jobs for quite some time. Skills are just going to be part of that, as they have been for a very long time. But we've kind of done that by talking in a way where I say a skill and you think you understand it, but we're talking a different language. The AI now is a means of basically creating what I would call a Rosetta Stone, so that you really understand that you're saying the same thing and you've got some understanding across the organization, and you can help workforce planning and a whole host of other things. But it's not some form of nirvana that will arrive overnight, or at least that's not my belief.
You just shattered everyone's dreams, David. You just tuned in. They all came in thinking this is going to be I love it, and this is why it's important to have these conversations, because I see some definitely companies that are entering into this space that are not realizing all of the things that you're just sharing, that everyone's just shared right now. They think that they have this new shiny technology and it's all going to be great, and they then realize actually it's more of a cultural transformational challenge and change as much as it is the technology. So it's really important that we come together and share.
But Chris, I think if you don't do this and others do it, and others are able to adapt, if you think that in 5 years' time generative AI is likely to change jobs quite substantively, and you don't understand that, then I think you're at a disadvantage. So the challenge is the technology, in a sense. When do you jump on this? How do you jump on it in a responsible way, an ethical way, in a way that fits your business, that meets your use cases? But if you turn a blind eye to it, I think in 5 or 6 years' time, you will find that you are no longer as agile as your competition. And that's the challenge.
And you're very right, David. And I actually believe that in this journey towards the future, this is what the biggest advantage of looking into the world from a skill lens will bring, because they will bring something that the traditional jobs won't be able to bring. So I agree with you. So we will never get rid of jobs, or not really in the near future. But definitely, if we look in a future where in 2034, one of the latest Deloitte research tells us the number of people 65 years old will outnumber the number of people below 18. This means that the talent shortage is a reality that happens tomorrow. So the point on skills combined with the AI will be, are they helping us to accelerate this transition, and how? And for instance, by looking into skills and skill adjacencies, are we looking into a way of bringing all of it together? And for instance, starting tearing down the traditional function definitions. We will need function in future. So for me, the question is no more, do we need jobs in future, but will we need functions in the future?
And I think, you're also going to see, to your point, with generative AI, the interesting thing here is it lifts people of lower ability up to do tasks that they haven't been able to do before. So your ability to then widen your talent pool and at a time when business models are changing, when we have, the world of work has never been changing faster than it is today. And we have a challenge around meeting climate change and an aging population. So the aim of getting productivity overall up, getting more people into the workforce is something that we have to rise to. And ultimately, this is an enabler as a technology in the long term, but it's finding your way into it and how you want to use it, and not seeing this as some form of unicorn solution. It won't be. And to your point, I think, how we think about this and how functions, at the end of the day, the aim should be to empower line managers to put this data in front of them so that they don't necessarily need very high overhead. I think, HR will still be there, but it will be different to what it is today as it was 10 years ago. I mean, or 20 years ago, when I first came in to Shell, I was, sitting down with people and thinking about whether I gave them an extra £50 on their pay increase. And we don't do that anymore. And we haven't done that for 15 years. And in 10 years or 15 years, we won't be doing the things we are today. So technology will be a key enabler of that, and always has been.
Yeah, I think the key that that we need to spend our time on is staying ready, right? Because it's ever evolving. And I think your note, David, around turning a blind eye to it only disadvantages you in the future. And so I think it is about understanding at a core what's your perspective from an ethics standpoint, what's your cultural readiness. And you mentioned something earlier, just in like, what's your readiness? So you say you're ready for AI, but are your systems today, are they ready? Are they consistent? Do you understand when you have a skill in a job description? Is everybody on the same page there? So I think there's work that organizations can do now, even before they begin to scale up AI operations. So
and that's
it's energizing.
For generative AI and knowledge management and a whole host of other things. And and Gen AI will create other problems. Performance management. How do you track that? It's going to create ER/IR challenges that we haven't had in a long time. Change your recruitment strategy. So much will change. And I think it's about how you understand that you have the data to be able to adapt to those challenges.
Yeah, David, on this one on particular, I think where technology can really help is in building the first layer, like the foundation of all these transformations. And you mentioned the Rosetta Stone, so the common language that you can create with the technology right now. I think it's really important to put that image to the maximum. So Rosetta Stone means being able to work in as many languages as you would like. So that's something I think in your global organization, it's really important to have a really clear focus on how do we make sure we have the same approach globally and we are not separating the approaches just because of the language, because we are not able in different countries and cultures, because we are using different languages to do the same thing in terms of HR. So I think that's a really precise area where an AI-driven skills technology should be able to help you. If it's not, I think it's a problem. And I think you need to look for probably some other providers and to challenge your existing, because that's key in your global scope.
I agree. And so many people say, oh, I've got the gold standard of a taxonomy. It doesn't exist.
No.
So ultimately, it's interoperability in the Rosetta Stone analogy of how you are able to understand what in one language is this and another language is called something slightly different. But that's human culture right there for you. I mean, that's diversity at its core, right? That's the classic around why certain cultures call one thing and even in the English language that happens all the time. You just need to cross the Atlantic divide.
Yeah. Wow, that was a lot to take in. I feel like we could do a whole series on each of these things. I think one of the things I was thinking about whilst everyone was talking AI in many ways is like a great equalizer, right? And I think someone mentioned that earlier. I think was it who mentioned that earlier? I think it was
I think it was
yourself.
probably me. I think I
Yeah, it was
called
you.
it a
Yeah,
great
yeah, you
leveler.
mentioned.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was
yeah.
trying to remember. So because we're now able to do some of these things at scale that we could just never do before, right? Empowering our employees to take charge of their careers, right? Is in my day, I'm not that old, but I mean, I started work when I was 17. You didn't have that opportunity to really take it into your own hands in the way you can do now in terms of upskilling and reskilling and being able to tap into a talent marketplace and apply for opportunities, etc. So employees are going to now feel really empowered to take charge of their careers as well. And to Loic's point, you're now doing that globally because AI can translate into, I think it's 97% of the world's languages at this point. And in 2 months' time, you'll have voice with the release of OpenAI's voice capability. Now you can talk to the AI in 97% of the world's languages and have a conversation as well. So this is just the beginning. So if you're not on board now, you need to get on board. You're already behind. Even a small company like ours with 15 employees, we've been working in this space for 3 years, building our own AI co-pilot for HR leaders, because we realize as content creators that we're going to be disrupted as well. So there's no function industry or anyone who's not going to be disrupted by this, in my opinion, as well. So it's exciting times. But I'm being told by the team, but we have to wrap up. But before I let everyone go, like parting piece of advice. So, what would be your parting piece of advice for everyone? And then we'll say goodbye. Sarah, you're gonna kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the piece of advice would be to look into the user experience first. Whatever you do, let user experience be your light, because it will drive adoption, it will drive consistency, it will drive skills, and it will drive a better learning for the tool as well. So if there is one thing for you to concentrate on, let it be the user experience.
Love that. Tony?
Yeah, I think get started. Get started with my advice. Don't wait any longer. Don't wait for the perfect time or perfect technology. Just get started.
Love it. Alex?
I'd say keep humans at the center of what you're doing, right? I think delivering on that experience that Sarah shared, but also thinking about the lasting impacts of our decision with a mean for generations to come will be critical.
Yeah, super important. We can't forget that part, right? Loic?
Yes, I will probably be stealing the Rosetta Stone from David. Look for your Rosetta Stone. Ask your tech providers to be able to build that Rosetta Stone. And it's not that complicated to build. So if someone is telling you that you need 6 to 12 months to get ready, that's not true, because if the product and the technology are well designed, and if the company is understanding your business and your way you do things, then it could be done in a matter of weeks. And that would be the short track I would be looking for. So probably agreeing with Tony as well on go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. You just put all of these tech companies under so much pressure right now.
Yeah.
They're all gonna be like, Loic said you can do it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, but actually this is what we can do to some extent. And then of course we can adapt to some context,
Yeah,
but we
of
did
course.
that in 8 weeks for really global organization on thousands and thousands and thousands of users globally. So
Yeah, I love it.
it can be done.
Everyone's sweating now.
Yeah.
Last but not least, David.
So a lot of it's been said, but I would see it as the key to helping you to be agile. I don't see it as a predeterministic thing around skills. It's going to tell you completely the future. If you went back 24 months, everyone would have been a prompt engineer, and now, to your point, you can talk to in 2 months you'll be able to talk to generative AI. So this is about navigating a world that is changing,
Yeah.
and you at a certain moment work out when you want to get on the train, how you want to get on the train, and there is no cookie cutter approach. You need to pick the thing that works for you in your context.
Yeah. And the train's gonna only get faster. and keep moving. So jump on now. Well, look, that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Massive thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you all for sharing and joining us, and for everyone that's tuned in from all over the world. Obviously, special thank you to our friends at 365 Talents for helping us bring this panel together. Wherever you're watching right now, there's a giant button beneath the video that you're watching. If you click that, you can download their latest report, which actually teaches you how to leverage AI in HR to help shape the future of work. So there's a very practical steps you can take. So download that. It's free. Also, as many of you know, we launched the HR Leaders Atlas Copilot a few weeks ago. So you can also download that in the chat. That's been trained on over 10,000 hours of content that we've created. Thank you again, everyone, wherever you are in the world, and I wish you all the best. See you later, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.